Stuff your eyes with wonder. Live as if you'd drop dead in 10 seconds. See the world. It's more fantastic than any dream made or paid for in factories. Ask no guarantees, ask for no security. There never was such an animal. And if there were, it would be related to the great sloth which hangs upside down in a tree all day, every day, sleeping its life away. To hell with that. Shake the tree and knock the great sloth down on his ass. When Guy Montag arrives at the end of the world and at the end of the book of Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451, he is given that piece of advice by a fellow homeless survivor named Granger. What is one to do at the dawn of complete cultural and human devastation, asks Montag. How does one face the impossible, the loss of everything they loved or understood or hoped would be? What should one do as a rare and lucky survivor for whatever world would come after? In this giant, giant mess of times, where does one even begin? Stuff your eyes, Granger says, with wonder. This brings me to the International Festival of Arts and Ideas. When I was a graduate playwriting student here at the Yale School of Drama, as it was then called, I used to work for the festival. I was a hospitality and artist assistant, and I fucking loved it. The job largely meant running around in shorts and a lanyard in the summer sun, replenishing pretzels and dried mangoes in artist green rooms, and, my favorite, slinging drinks on the New Haven Green during concerts. The alcohol tent was the best seat in the house, not that there was much sitting. Side by side with the stage, my body felt every vibration of music that emerged from an instrument or a throat as I would look out at an audience swaying in waves of joy and enchantment. This city was alive. It pulsed with creation and thought, and it gathered. New Haven, you gathered so well, because you knew that whatever was on offer at the festival was an act of generosity and hope that promised possibility. What might you learn? What might you feel? Who might you meet? What idea or person might collide with your life tonight and change it forever? This sensation is what Guy Montag is trying to touch throughout the entirety of Fahrenheit 451, though he doesn't know it. He's never experienced it, but he senses that something like it might exist on the far-off perimeters of the only life he's known, because he's seen a person take their own life for that same type of feeling I got to experience on the New Haven Green, for whatever wonder it is that books or music or theater might contain. Guy Montag might not know exactly what it is he's hunting for, but he knows the barrenness of life in its absence. I was so happy to be invited back to this beautiful city on this most beautiful campus to speak about Fahrenheit 451 as part of New Haven's Big Read initiative and how the book relates to our earlier panel on art as resistance. I'm currently adapting the novel into a play for Broadway. Between that and the libretto for a musical adaptation of The Great Gatsby with Florence Welch, I will cover many of the books you probably spark notes in high school. Both of these books, by the way, have been banned in certain parts of this country. Some claim it's for their language, violence, and sexual content, while they still teach Romeo and Juliet, which has all of those. Though I suspect Gatsby and Fahrenheit's banishment had more to do with the looking glasses they present us about our characters as Americans, as well as our capacity as people. And something about communing with that seems very scary indeed to certain people in charge, perhaps because once we can see and understand, we can choose to change. Do you know why books such as this are so important? Professor Faber asks of Montag after Montag begs him to be taught how to understand what he reads. Because they have quality, Faber replies. This book has pores. It has features. This book can go under the microscope. You'd find life under the glass, streaming past in infinite profusion. It has detail, telling detail. Do you know why books are hated and feared? They show the pores in the face of life. The comfortable people want only wax moon faces. We are living in a time when flowers are trying to live on flowers instead of growing on good rain and black loam. Even fireworks, for all their prettiness, come from the chemistry of the earth. Yet somehow we think we can grow, feeding on flowers and fireworks. What makes art last beyond the lifetime of its maker and follow us into our futures? And what makes it fodder for thought and therefore danger? It's in the pores, Bradbury tells us. There's examination of a culture's features, like discovering a genetic predisposition we can track in decades to come. Great American novels quest after the American character. Who is this complex, wide-ranging character comprised from a combination of pilgrims and pillaged, explorers and exploited, and of complicated strivers all? Guy Montag is that part of the American character that is shocked out of his comfortable righteousness by a simple question posed to him by a teenager. Are you happy? The relevancy of mind domination, fascism, and the end of the world in our current age needs no words. What struck me most in Fahrenheit 451 was the loneliness of its people, the loneliness living somewhere in all of us. It shows us how our yearning for meaning and connection and our fears of its challenges can be feasted upon by those who grasp power. How we want so desperately to feel like we're doing the right thing, that we matter or have impact, that we might somehow leave our thumbprints in people's minds. In Bradbury's epic dystopian classic, I was most moved by our riotous longing for meaning, for something true and lasting to devote one finite life to in a society whose values may be suspect, and by the way we blow up our lives to unearth whatever truth that may shatter us into our most honest self. This is also a story about falling in love with possibility, of a man falling in love with new ideas and falling in love with books. It's about taking stock of your life, as many of us did when our worlds either shuddered or shattered in the pandemic, and then working to find that life's most authentic expression, even if it means torching all that came before. Published in 1953, Fahrenheit 451 tells the story of Guy Montag, a fireman in a world that does not put out fires but starts them. The story is set in a future American city where intellectualism is suppressed and critical thinking and curiosity are discouraged. In other words, it is New Haven's greatest nightmare. People in this world are bombed with ads and loud, hollow entertainment, leaving them no space to think for themselves and creating a selfish, simply pleasure-seeking, disconnected, and empty society. Our main character's job is burning books, dangerous contraband, which his government has deemed lethal to happiness and therefore illegal to possess. Montag works for a regime that is trying to erase all sources of complexity, contradiction, and confusion to ensure uncomplicated anesthesia for all its citizens. And it's this work of book burning that gives Montag meaning for most of his life. It's hard to see flaws in a world that's been working out for you, until you must confront how it's not. Because though outwardly strong and principled, Montag is a secretly lonely man in a crumbling marriage to a woman lost in addiction. One night he has his worldview upended by a rebelliously free-thinking teenager's invitation to wonder, and our story begins. Has he been living incorrectly and violently forcing others to as well? Is there a path to happiness that his life's work has actively tried to snuff out? As Montag investigates the corners of his life, trying to save his marriage and his soul while staying alive in a violent world at war, his eyes open to the harms of the stifling worldview he's stewarded. He quests after the possibility of a more connected, deeply thinking and feeling world, counter to everything he's previously believed to be true. This leads to great destruction, including the loss of that marriage, a number of lives, and an entire city and world. But he gets the chance to begin again, this time in connected community. The novel begins with a question, are you happy? And Montag's awakening begins. On his way home from work one night, Montag encounters his neighbor Clarice, a wide-thinking, curious young woman who at first confuses him. To Montag, she speaks an entirely different language. For all of Clarice's baffling thoughts and behavior, her question rings in Montag's ear long after they part. Of course I'm happy, he thinks to himself. What do you think, I'm not? And then he realizes. He was not happy, writes Bradbury. He wore his happiness like a mask, and the girl had run off across the lawn with the mask, and there was no way of going to knock on her door and ask for it back. Montag is forced to immediately confront this truth that night when he discovers his wife Mildred unconscious from an overdose of pills. As the EMTs pump Millie's stomach, they slip that this kind of thing happens all the time now. In my adaptation, Mildred is running from the smell of dead love in her home and into the arms of anesthetizing addiction of entertainment of her parlor walls, and on this particular night, into actual drugs. Her tragedy is not just the loss of communication with her husband, but a total disappointment with actual people. To Millie, the parlors are her family, always there, always on, safe and easy, dependable. As much as we might want to judge her, Mildred is not far off from our own distractions. Oh, hey, what that? Oh, hey, what that? I could wait. Great. Mildred is not that far from our own selves of our distraction and dopamine scrolls. Who among us has not partaken of a cat video or 20, as on the news and in the streets, human beings are disappeared and entire cities burn? And has not her husband stopped seeing her just as much as she him? But to Montag, his wife has become so empty, her stomach pumped and her blood replaced, that he fears she's fallen asleep to life. And as he becomes more desperate and emboldened, he feels he must be the one to wake her before it's too late. Out in the world, Montag moves through a collection of dangers, including the giant mechanical hounds of the firehouse that can smell rebellion and will strike to kill, as well as constant jets flying overhead that hint at an impending war. One day, Montag is sent on an assignment to burn a home where he witnesses a woman so loving of her books that she chooses to immolate herself instead of letting them go, in defiance of the firefighters sent there to destroy them. It's there in the ruins that Montag, in shock, steals a book, the most dangerous thing he can do. He brings it home, inadvertently endangering Millie in the process. He tells his wife about the woman and about his new thoughts, which brings on her anger and fear. So she tells him the news of the world that they live in. Clarice is dead. But Montag, full of grief and confusion, only becomes more ravenous for something beyond the life he's known. There must be something in books, he says. Things we can't imagine, to make a woman stay in a burning house. There must be something there. Montag cries that we need not to be let alone. We need to be really bothered once in a while. How long since you were really bothered about something important, something real? His boss, Captain Beatty, suspects Montag of harboring illegal books and crashes his home that night, hoping to shake him up a bit by chronicling what led to the banning of books in the first place, and reminding him of his sense of purpose, at least to this version of the world. Most important thing for you to remember, Montag, says Beatty, is we're the happiness boys. We stand against the small tide of villains who want to make everyone sad. Don't let them drown our world. We depend on you. I don't think you realize how important you are, how important we are to our happy world as it stands now. But instead of deterring him, Beatty's stories and explanations only spurn Montag on. Appealing to his ever shakier value system of book burning only makes Montag question it further. And so after his boss leaves, Montag decides to investigate the exact thing he's dedicated his life to destroying. One last thing, Beatty tells Montag before he leaves. At least once in his career, every fireman gets an itch. What do the books say, he wonders. What if a fireman accidentally, really not intending anything really, what if he takes a book home with him? A natural error, curiosity. We don't get worried. We don't get mad. We let the fireman keep the book 24 hours. And if he hasn't burned it by then, we simply come and burn it for him. Beatty himself quotes books a number of times, revealing he's memorized entire passages from a time when supposedly firemen were meant to have had some understanding of what they were meant to liquidate. He hints at being a deeper thinker, and therefore perhaps a disappointed one. Looking around at his life, what's all that thinking got him? So if you can't beat him, like Millie in my adaptation, Beatty may actually want more than his society allows, even as they lose themselves in what it does. Instead of anesthesia, Beatty trades the possibility of intellectual and soul expansion for power. He gets to be a fire captain, seated seemingly safely above them all, but still the longing remains. Take my word for it, Montag, Beatty tells him. I've had to read a few in my day to know what it was about, and the books say nothing. They're about non-existent people, figments of imagination. They're made up, and if they're nonfiction, even worse. One writer calling another an idiot, one professor screaming at another, all of them running around, putting out the stars and extinguishing the sun. You come away lost. Don't give the people anything slippery like philosophy or examination. That way lies melancholy. Don't try to measure and meet the universe. The universe will cut you down, and you'll feel dumb and lonely. I know. I've tried. Beatty tried to measure the universe and feels he failed. So now he'll subjugate anyone else for trying to do the same. Because what humiliation would that be if anyone were to actually succeed? Montag begs his wife Mildred to help him uncover the value of books. She really does try at first, in my adaptation, realizing for a brief moment how much has been lost between the two of them and revealing her longing for its return, but they struggle to find a meaning they can understand. The more Montag fights for books, the further she feels him pulling away from her, so Millie shuts it down. She feels that Montag wants her to come over to his world, and in that asking, he rejects hers. He rejects her family, or the closest thing she's felt to having one. And even as it's killing her, the parlor walls and sleeping pills, it's still a rejection, and so she won't help him anymore. So Montag seeks help in a former professor he met, someone he once placed in a file labeled Future Investigations. He asks him to teach him to understand what he reads in books. What would make a woman burn herself alive for them? You don't need books, Montag, Faber tells him. You need some of the things that were once in books. The same things could be in parlor walls now, but the same infinite details and awareness. You used to be able to find it in records, motion pictures, in old friends. You could look for it in nature and look for it in yourself. Books were only one type of house where we stored a lot of the things we were afraid we might forget. There's nothing magical in them at all. The magic's in what books say, how they stitched the patches of the universe together for us. Montag begins to show signs of critical thinking that surprise even himself, and Faber and he conspire to try to copy some of the books that Montag is meant to burn. They dream of sharing them with others secretly, hoping to inspire and incite. Maybe the revolution could occur one page at a time. Faber looks at Montag like a student, like a son, the first in a long time to speak to him of wonder, even as he doesn't exactly understand it. And Faber agrees to walk in step with Montag's quest, even if, for now, it's just through an earpiece radio. I wish I'd been braver when it mattered, Faber confesses. I saw the way things were going a long time back and I said nothing. I could have spoken up and out. When they finally set you firemen off on book burning, I grunted and huffed a few times, shook a bunch of fingers, tisked a bit, what a shame, and that was that. Do you think I'm a coward, Montag, for staying home while the world cracks? To which Montag replies, as he does in the book, we all do what we can. And he goes off into the world to incite what he hopes might even be some small change, with Faber all the while in his ear, guiding him. Not all technology is bad. It's how we use it and who controls it. That night, Montag returns home to find Mildred and her fellow addict friends watching the parlors. Montag observes their carelessness and shallowness and forces them to listen to a poem. He surprises even himself when one of the women breaks down in sobs, shaken to her core by the feelings unearthed by poetry. The friends leave, vowing to never return to this house again. In their absence, Millie accuses Montag of murdering her family. She demands he give up a book so they can be spared, but as Montag goes to the firehouse to do so, Millie calls and turns in her husband, and then she deserts him. They will never see each other again. In the end, Millie chooses the familiarity of distraction over connection and expansion, and its potential for heartbreak, or so she thinks. Montag delivers one of his contraband books to Beatty, hoping to pass it off as the only one he has, but it's too late. Beatty knows all of it. It was confirmed by his wife and neighbors. He orders Montag to burn his own house down and informs him that when he's finished, he'll be under arrest. Montag instead sets Beatty on fire with a flame gun and escapes the city, dodging the deathly mechanical hounds that are chasing after him. As he runs, he wonders if Beatty had wanted to die. In all the moments leading up to his last, Beatty was quoting literature meant to be used as weapons and trickery against Montag, but still that's what Beatty had housed in his mind. Beatty may have secretly cared for the memories of the words, at least enough to remember them, but he only meant anything in this world if he destroyed them. At the edges of the country, Montag meets a group of like-minded intellectual refugees, survivors and strivers who want to devote their lives to preserving great books. They'll memorize them in hopes of passing them on and starting again. Elsewhere, the war has officially begun. The bombs start falling on the city Montag just escaped from, and he wonders about the love that he left there. What did you give to the city, Montag, he wonders. Ashes. What did the others give to each other? Nothingness. One of the fellow refugees takes Montag's arm, Granger, and tells him about someone very dear to him. Listen, he says, when I was a boy, my grandfather died and he was a sculptor. He was also a very kind man who had a lot of love to give the world. He did a million things in his lifetime. He was always busy with his hands. And when he died, I suddenly realized I wasn't crying for him at all, but for the things he did. I cried because he would never do them again. He would never carve another piece of wood or help us raise doves and pigeons in the backyard or play the violin the way he did or tell us jokes the way he did. He was part of us. And when he died, all the actions stopped dead, and there was no one to do them just the way he did. He was individual. He was an important man. I've never gotten over his death. Often I think, what wonderful carvings never came to birth because he died. How many jokes are missing from the world? He shaped the world. He did things to the world. The world was bankrupted of 10 million fine actions the night he passed on. Everyone must leave something behind when he dies, my grandfather said. A child, or a book, or a painting, or a house, or a wall built, or a pair of shoes made, or a garden planted. Something your hand touched, some way, so your soul has somewhere to go when you die. And when people look at that tree, or that flower you planted, you're there. It doesn't matter what you do, he said. So long as you change something from the way it was before you touched it into something that's like you after you take your hands away. The difference between a man who just cuts lawns and a real gardener is in the touching, he said. The lawn cutter might just as well never have been there at all, but the gardener will be there for a lifetime. My grandfather showed me some V2 rocket films once 50 years ago. Have you ever seen the atom bomb mushroom from 200 miles up? It's a pinprick. It's nothing. With the wilderness all around it, my grandfather ran off with a V2 rocket film a dozen times and then hoped that someday our cities would open up and let the green and the land and the wilderness in more, to remind people that we're allotted a little space on Earth and that we survive in that wilderness that can take back what it has given as easily as blowing his breath on us or sending the sea to us. We are not so big. When we forget how close the wilderness is in the night, my grandpa says, someday it will come in and get us. For we will have forgotten how terrible and real it can be. You see? Grandfather's been dead for all these years, but if you lifted my skull, by God, in the convolutions of my brain, you'd find the big ridges of his thumbprint. He touched me. As I said earlier, he was a sculptor. I hate a Roman named Status Quo, he said to me. Stuff your eyes with wonder. The novel concludes with a bomb falling on the city. The city where Mildred stayed is now rubble, and the band of intellectuals, their books in their minds, head towards that rubble, hoping to rebuild, with Montag leading the way. By the end of the story, Montag has yet to feel or understand the power of books. It's an incredible irony. He is not the one who was brought to tears or flames by their potency, but he believes in their potential, enough to torch the world he came from in his own way and start again. His thinking has stretched enough to challenge his society and embrace the possibility of a new one. In this new society, we will have knowledge, we will have curiosity, and he will be at the front of the line, mobilized to try to create a more meaningful existence. Great literature, in my opinion, is not just a cautionary tale of what could be, but a compassionate portrait of what we've been. It's a place where we can encounter ourselves, where we can mourn and love ourselves and the world, and make some decisions about our futures. At the end of Fahrenheit 451, we are left with hope. We are left with community, a gathering of few who have chosen to merge minds and make something grander and fairer than what was. This is what we're all doing here today. We are gathering and merging minds to maybe make something grander and fairer than what was. And it's what we're doing out there in these classrooms, in these theaters, and on the New Haven Green. Every hand that's made something, like Granger's grandfather, is an actor of hope and resistance, and their thumbprints will be what we host in our minds at the end of the world. If this seems impossible in our age, I'd like to quote that other great American novelist, F. Scott Fitzgerald, who said that the test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in the mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. One should, for example, be able to see that things are hopeless and yet be determined to make them otherwise. Though Fitzgerald, being a Princeton boy, maybe ribbed this institution by casting the careless Tom Buchanan as a Yale alum, he balanced it out by casting Nick Carey as one too. And it's Nick who recounts to us at the end of that novel those hopes of another great man, of all of us. I bet there are some truly wonderful nerds out there who have this memorized. Sing along with me. I'm still going to read it. Nick tells us at the end of The Great Gatsby, most of the big shore places were closed now, and there were hardly any lights except the shadowy moving glow of a ferry boat across the Sound. And as the moon rose higher, the inessential houses began to melt away until gradually I became aware of the old island here that flowered once for Dutch sailors' eyes, a fresh green breast of the new world. Its vanished trees, the trees that had made way for Gatsby's house, had once pandered in whispers to the last and greatest of all human dreams. For a transitory, enchanted moment, man must have held his breath in the presence of this continent, compelled into an aesthetic contemplation he neither understood nor desired, face to face for the last time in history with something commensurate to his capacity for wonder. And as I sat there, brooding on the old, unknown world, I thought of Gatsby's wonder when he picked out the green light at the end of Daisy's dock. He had come a long way to this blue lawn, and his dream must have seemed so close that he could hardly fail to grasp it. He did not know that it was already behind him, somewhere back in that vast obscurity beyond the city, where the dark fields of the Republic rolled on under the night. Gatsby believed in the green light, the orgiastic future that year by year recedes before us. It eluded us then, but that's no matter. Tomorrow we will run faster, stretch our arms further, and one fine morning, so we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. This is all to say, we've messed up a lot in America, but we have to do better. We owe it to this world and what it could be. We have, after all, the capacity for wonder, and that means that we can create, not just destroy. One should, for example, be able to see that things are hopeless and yet be determined to make them otherwise. To try to say anything meaningful is a risk. To create any kind of art is a risk. To love is a risk. It's to be in a race against our own decline and the world's uncertainty or apathy. To make anything is to battle the lure of distraction until it's just not safe there anymore either. To tell stories is an act of will and hope in the face of every kind of resistance. Every artist you will encounter at this festival and in this life is trying to make meaning of themselves with their limited human bodies and breath. We are trying to understand and be understood, to say, it's like this. In some cases, we're trying to make change, to say, yes, but must it be like this? Every story is trying to gain access and give access to a wider possibility for human life. I'm here to encourage you to tell yours and to listen. When your bones are dust, may the contents of your minds and memories live on in language and image and sound. May you be resurrected in the future's theaters and on its pages. May someone find your grandmother's accent in a poem one day, or on a stage. May you right the wrongs of your past. What narratives have gotten you wrong? Remedy them with your own. What microphones are spreading lies about your family? Dare to pick up your own. What are you afraid we will become? Tell us. You should expect resistance from the outside and the inside, whether it's the apathy of a consumerist culture or the voices in your own head telling you not to even try. Whether it's gatekeepers implying you're not enough or regimes of power bent on actually erasing you, expect resistance. But trust that your story might save a life. Trust there is a Montag waiting to light up the world for your words. Be the gardener, as Granger talks about, of whatever field you choose. That's the theater for me. Writing for the stage to me is the willing of life. To create rather than destroy, it means making a home. We gather a range of humans with a range of life experiences to all work together towards the common purpose of telling the fullest version of a story possible, to all be in service of something beyond ourselves. As I mentioned before, I really hate writing. I really, really, truly do. But I do it for this act of creation and community, For a long time, it's where I felt the most alive, even when exhausted, with my life being thoroughly used up, as Shaw would say. Life is no brief candle to me, he said. It is a sort of splendid torch, which I have got hold of for the moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations. Theater, whether artist or audience, is the sharing of our dying bodies and battered attentions in a dark room in the hopes of walking out together into some kind of light. To write for the theater is to occupy a number of different consciousnesses. I have to be everybody I write. Then I ask others to step into them. To move in somebody's mind and heart and wound and to choose as them, whether as actor or as audience, theater asks us to imagine living as another, to expand our outlook on human possibility, which might be why it's so threatening to some, and so nourishing to others, and so vital to all. Is that what the book burners were so afraid of? That we'd see within and beyond ourselves and reach out to each other instead of disappearing into the devices that they control. In 2023, Surgeon General Vivek Murthy issued an urgent advisory that decreed we are in a loneliness epidemic. Our specific brand of American loneliness is actually a public health crisis. In the Surgeon General's advisory, loneliness is described as a state of mind, a subjective, distressing experience that results from perceived isolation or inadequate, meaningful connections. By this definition, loneliness is not just a lack of people and connections in one's life, but also potentially a lack of purpose and people to share it with. Loneliness can be a feeling of insignificance, a feeling like you're invisible in the world you live in. Many years ago, I wrote a play loosely based around my immigrant mother's first 2 decades in the country, working at factories and cleaning houses in North Jersey. My mother had lived most of that time with a belief that she was to be unseen, that it actually maybe served her to be as invisible as possible. There were immigration issues, domestic violence issue, money issues, and silence was safety, she thought. Growing up, I judged some of the choices she made for survival, choices that not just frustrated, but sometimes quite literally endangered us, choices I didn't understand and raged against, until a few years later, I found myself making similar ones. I was at a point in my life where I thought I was going to give up playwriting. I just graduated Yale. I'd hung up my lanyard for the Festival of Arts and Ideas, and I moved to New York. I found it to be so hard to come from no money and carve out time to write between bar jobs. I found it so hard to hear no so often. It was so hard to even find an apartment. It was all just so hard. So I asked myself, if I gave up now, what would I regret not having said? And I gave myself a week, and I wrote it in 5 days. With the hindsight of humility, I wrote a love letter and an apology to my mother. That is, I wrote her a play. And it was about how she tried her damn best in the hardness of it all. I sat next to her at the premiere, terrified, hoping she could read my intention. The first time I wrote a play about her, we didn't speak for a year. A woman from a formerly communist country and a formerly questionable immigration status was not into her daughter blasting details of her life to strangers. Also, the writing was bad. I had a lot to learn. She was justified in her criticism. But this time, as the lights came back on, the audience leapt to its feet, and a 400-seat house was applauding her life. This woman who assumed she was invisible, that her life was better left in the shadows, I felt her seen and witnessed. I felt my entire neighborhood of single working class, mostly immigrant mothers be seen and witnessed. People told me that that woman on stage was their mother or their aunt, or that she was them. People from all over, no backgrounds the same. And some people who might never have shared 90 continuous minutes with someone like my mother. It maybe didn't change the world, but oh my God, my soul soared. Maybe someone else's did too, I don't know, even just for maybe a moment. I believe we're more alike than we are dissimilar. We've all experienced love and loss and grief and joy and the vast constellations of human emotions within our very specific circumstances. Art, like travel, shows us that there is no default way to live a life, but that we are all connected in this common effort to figure out exactly how. The more we get to share in these specific stories of varied experiences of shared humanity, the more bridges and respect and compassion there will be. The richer our lives, the wider our eyes and hearts, and potentially, hopefully, the less destructive and more creative our world. And that is an act of resistance. Art is the act of translating a truth, the truth that we absolutely matter. Insist on yourself and your thumbprint on the world. Thank you.